This is Frank Skinner. This is
Absolute Radio.
Hello, this is Frank Skinner on Absolute Radio with Emily Dean and Alan Cochrane. And please don't text us today because we're not live. Hopefully, I won't be saying that again for a very long time because we should be back in the studio soon. But today we aren't, so don't text us. However, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Frank on the Radio. Or, of course, you can email us via the Absolute Radio website. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Morgan.
Now, I really don't like not being live, as you know, mainly because I like getting lots of texts come flying in and from our readers responding to stuff that we've said. It's like sitting at some enormous, if you can imagine the sort of witty King Arthur's round table where people are just chucking in stuff all the time. It's like that. There's a double whammy today aside from that. One of them is at time of recording, the last games of the championship have not been played, football-wise. So as I speak, I don't know whether my team, West Bromwich Albion, are now in the Premiership or if they're facing that most preposterous of activities, the playoffs. They were sort of out of it all last. I won't bore you if you're non-football, but just briefly, they'd messed it up, they'd bottled it, and then the other team, Brentford, who were close behind them last Saturday, I could see the same fear in their eyes when I watched their game that I'd seen in West Brom's, and they bottled it as well. So now if we won last Wednesday,
I would love it
when you hear this, yeah, then that'll be tremendous news. And the other thing is, I was looking at Birmingham Live, which many of you will know is the sort of internet place for Birmingham news.
Never off it.
Yeah. And it said on there that why it was on Birmingham Live, I don't know particularly, but it says on there that on the 24th of July, which I think was yesterday, yesterday, 24th of July, that a meter with a asteroid with 170 metres circumference was going to go perilously close to the Earth. And we'll feel foolish if that's hit and we're not referring to it.
I feel like that's the sort of news story that the regional newspapers shouldn't be the only ones covering.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? I don't know if they've got a lot of... maybe there's still some dinosaurs and it's a story still very close to home for those guys.
But is it specific? Is the meteor specifically going to graze Birmingham and nowhere else is that?
You know
bothered?
what? I'll tell you what it's light on, this article. It's light on distance.
Oh, yeah.
So it says that it helps the reader with the 170 metres circumference by saying that is half as much again the circumference of the London Eye.
Yeah.
Now, I know many of their readers will be saying, I don't know why you brought London up, so London, eh? Which is what I would have said. But also, it gives you the technical... It doesn't say the distance, but it tells you that the asteroid is known as 2020 ND. That's what it's called, which is so ND for no danger, isn't it? It's got to be. But I don't want to name that. Obviously, it worried me because NASA have been so busy getting in touch with people who think they've changed their star signs that there might be an asteroid heading towards Birmingham that they haven't really picked up.
Oh, yeah.
Because people are phoning them saying, hey, I used to be lucky in love and now I'm just ambitious.
You know, they want to do a little more asteroid policing and a little less producing satin bomber jackets for Buzz Aldrin to wear.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you.
I think that. I mean, I wouldn't... There's not long now probably to go with Buzz. It'd be very sad to cut off his silk bomber supply at this stage. That would be unnecessarily... I wonder where they'll all go, those... those silk bombers.
I think we know one will end up in a certain North London home.
Oh, I'd love it. Imagine that. Imagine an actual Buzz Aldrin silk bomber. Right, hang it next to my London Hard Rock Cafe leather varsity jacket.
Frank Skinner on
Absolute Radio.
I was reading, and I know we try and keep it light on the show, but I was reading that the Thames, you know, that river that sort of goes from the Cotswolds. Yeah, that big river, the Thames. It's got a major plastic problem going on at the moment. Now, I know that's something that's talked about a lot. But I was talking to my 8-year-old about this. He is his year's representative eco-warrior at school. So they have to have meetings now and again in which they talk about... Basically, they used to spy on their parents. So we will go and say if we're not putting the stuff in the right bins.
Is that right?
It's a fabulous East Germany theme they've got
really
going.
is.
But he was, we were talking about the plastic thing, and I pointed out to him, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but he's got a Mr. Potato Head. You know those toys?
Yeah.
I was going to say, he's a beautiful child. I won't have that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I should have expressed it more subtly. No, he's got a Mr. Potato Head, and in the modern Mr. Potato Head style, it is a plastic. It's sort of potato-ish shaped thing, and then you stick eyes and noses. Yeah. He's actually got the 11th Doctor, Mr. Potato Head.
He hasn't.
He has.
Which one's the 11th one?
Matt Smith.
Okay, I like that one.
So he's got a fez and floppy hair and dicky belt.
What hat does Mr. Potato Head normally wear?
Well,
is it a sort of trilby?
You got a choice. Because that's the whole thing with Mr. Potato Head is the endless versatility of having things just stuck into you. Which I think Pete Doherty once said to me.
Oh, come on.
But when I was a kid and I had a Mr. Potato Head, when you opened the box, what you got was all the stick-on noses and hats and hands and shoes. But you had to provide a potato in which you stuck them.
That's
into
right.
which you stuck them.
Did you have that out with Mr. Potato Head?
I'd forgotten, but yes, I now realise.
Me also.
Now isn't it crazy that in an age where kids are taught at school that plastic is a bad thing, that we've actually gone away from the organic to the plastic in the Mr. Potato Head world?
I think you're right.
I've got another point. Stick around. The Nerf gun,
Yes.
which is a gun that fires, a plastic gun that fires foam plastic bullets, very popular amongst children. When I was a kid, used to be a thing called the potato gun, very popular. Do you remember that, Al?
I do, and I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, it was a metal gun, and you used
Needless to say, I don't.
We used to stick it into the potato, and it would take out a pellet of potato, which you could then fire.
Yeah.
Again, great for the environment.
Yeah.
Now, my third of
Not
these...
so great for the carpet, potato everywhere.
No, but you know...
I was going to say, Al, not so great for the guests either. I mean, come on.
At least they know they're being hit by something organic. Although I wouldn't want to shoot Emily with a carbohydrate. Forgive me.
My body repels them automatically.
Now, this is where at this point I want to turn to you guys for help. I have got a distant memory, and I haven't looked this up because I can't be bothered to look things up. I like to talk to people about them. I've got an idea that there used to be a potato radio that you stuck wires into, and you could get a station on there or two. I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about that.
Frank Skinner on Absolute Radio.
So I was trying to save the planet in the last link with my potato replaces plastic ideas. I mentioned the potato radio. Does that ring a bell with any of you guys?
Yes, I think
Yes.
it's a thing.
Absolutely. It was a sort of science project thing, as I recall. I remember the little red curly wires sticking out.
Yeah, that made the potato look like a security person. They've always got that curly wire behind the ear.
Yes, yes. No, absolutely, that was a thing, Frank. I suspect.
I think there might also be a potato, like little engined car that you can get in. Places like the Gadgety shop or something where you can motor a toy with a potato. I'm pretty sure you can make it do things.
On that subject,
do you think Elon Musk is aware of this?
I think he's got shares in potatoes.
Probably has.
On that subject, was there ever... He seems nice, Elon Musk. On that subject, was there ever the equivalent of a sort of Billy Bass fish, dancing sunflower, feet potato? Do you know what I mean? Did the potato ever get its moment in those gadget shops?
I can't. There used to be in the Salvation Army broadsheet. Actually, it wasn't a broadsheet. It was like a magazine, but made on cheap paper. It used to be handed around the pubs. There was a cartoon featuring Sam Spoddykins, who was a potato who had adventures and would then speak to the... at the end, he'd share a moral with the readers.
Because it was in the Salvation Army.
Yeah. Because potatoes are profoundly moral vegetables. Did you not know that? I imagine they're amongst the most serious of the vegetables, don't you?
You reckon? Yeah,
well,
maybe.
I mean, if ever a vegetable got bad press, there's all this, eat as many, 5 a day is brilliant. Oh, that's it, eat your vegetables. But we're not counting potatoes. They're bad for you. So, I feel for them a bit. And also, I used to date somebody, actually, who did a kids' TV show, which was like a kids' cookery show. And there was a talking potato person on there, like a potato poppy, not a person who was potato-esque. So, they've had their 15 minutes of fame, potatoes, as predicted by Andy Warhol. So I don't think he was specifically thinking of them.
He doesn't look like he was a fan of the potato, Andy Warhol.
No, he really doesn't. He looks like he was a fan of the southern end of a leek turned upside down. You could actually make a very good Andy Warhol puppet with an upturned leek. Almost no work to do. If you had a few extra Mr. Potato Man noses and that lying around.
And just stick some black tights on for a polo neck. Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, and I think just a little bit of ketchup for the psoriasis on the face. And you're in business there. So if there's any kids listening, there you are, Mr. Maker, in brackets, pop art icons. That's how you make a lovely little Andy Warhol puppet with the southern end of a leek.
Frank Skinner on Absolute Radio.
Here's a question for you. I figure you guys... see, this is where I miss the readers being immediately on tap. Do racehorses still swallow their tongues?
You're right. That would be an excellent question to hand over to the public.
Yeah, I don't suppose you guys got any idea, have you?
No. I've got to be honest.
My dad was a big horse racing gambler man. And when I say big, he'd have a quid and 10 pence on most days. But every now and again he'd say to me, oh no, that horse swallowed it. So it had to pull out, it swallowed its own tongue. I don't think it was fatal always. But I
think it's a thing that humans do as well, but
is it?
Not very often. Yeah, occasionally footballers
their own
do it,
tongues.
Yeah, and they get stretchered off and it's scary.
Oh.
Oh, God, I didn't know that happened. The reason I think it sprang to mind is I was looking at the lyrics to Ça Plaint pour moi by Plastic Bertrand. I thought in translation. And it didn't feel like a very good translation. I could be wrong. But one of the things was that he said his cat had eaten its own tongue. And I don't think that can happen unless you remove it and then blah, blah. But if anyone knows about these things, do let us know. And even if you let us know and we talk about it next week, these are the sort of things that are important to me.
Yeah, so we've had making Andy Warhol out of leeks and cats swallowing their tongues. How's your morning going?
Well, it's pretty food-based.
I tell you what we need, Frank, is Lee Mack. He knows about the horses, doesn't he? Didn't he used to train Red Rum? Is that an urban myth?
Well,
I think it might be true.
He told me the first horse he ever rode was Red Rum.
Oh,
wow.
That's impressive.
I mean, that is one of those where do you go from here, isn't it?
Like my first flight being to Australia.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Did it occur to you that you might not like flying?
I suppose it must have. Yeah. So
that would be a good texting, wouldn't it? What's the best in at the deep end thing you ever did? Lee Matt, Red Rum, Alan Cochrane. I don't know what mine would be, but it's something I'll continue to think about during the course of this show. I'm just going to open a bottle of Purdy's. There it goes. I wanted to tell you what I was doing in case you thought I was breaking the neck of a domestic pet.
Where was your first flight, Frank? Do you remember?
My first flight, that was turned out to be a biggie. I flew to Rome and the plane was struck by lightning.
Oh, yeah.
So there was just a loud bang and a few people looked panicking. I thought maybe this happens a lot on planes. It's never happened to me since.
Well, ignorance is bliss in that regard, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
I was once on a plane that started to land, came into land, and at the very last minute went up again.
Oh.
And my partner, who's not a great flyer, said to me, "What happened? What happened?" And I said, "Oh, they do that a lot. You know, it's just they go in and then they say, "Oh, actually, can you give it 5 minutes?" And we just go up again. Don't worry about it. It's happened to me loads of times. Total lie. I was terrified as well. And then the steward walked past and did that mopping his brow thing, which really helped. It really, really helped. So if you're listening, Luigi, thanks for that.
Frank Skinner.
Absolute Radio.
We were talking just now about what you called in at the deep end moments. Al, your first ever flight was to Australia, which is very impressive. I'd like to add something to the proceedings, which is first time I ever played Boggle was with James Coburn of the Magnificent Seven. Thank you.
That is good.
That is... Was he any good?
He was good at everything. How can you imagine? He was good at everything.
You'd have liked him, Al. He was a martial arts enthusiast.
I've enjoyed several clips of him being interviewed, actually. I really like him. He seems like he's sound.
Yeah,
but
he was like... Oh, sorry, carry on.
I wasn't familiar with the game, you see, so it's quite a lot to take on board.
I've never played Boggle, I must say. Certainly not with James Coburn.
Well, it's egg timer based. And he seems slightly too monumental for the miniature egg timer. Do you know what I mean? That you get in the game. He seemed it was all wrong with his giant Hollywood limbs.
Are you sure you're not thinking of Twister?
No, but I have played that with Richard Whiteley. That's enough name dropping.
Have you actually?
Yes, I have.
That's funny.
It's Richard Whiteley.
Yes.
You both have a lot of celebrities playing really normal games anecdotes, I find. Much more so than me. I've not got those games.
Well,
anecdotes.
Frank and I also played Pictionary with Frank.
What, with was that with Michael Hutchins?
Yes, that was, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You could write a book on this.
I couldn't tell what he was answers. Where was that tangerine in his mouth?
Frank.
And I'll tell you what I've been watching just lately.
Goodness sake.
Twin Peaks.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Twin Peaks, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but when it was first broadcasting, probably 89 maybe, I was so obsessed with it. It's one of the first non-Doctor Who Match of the Day TV shows, perhaps the first that I watched every episode. I made a point of people would say, oh, do you fancy going out Thursday, and whenever it was, and I'd say, no, I can't, Twin Peaks is on. This was before we had a VHS recorder, which obviously changed our lives. And I've tried on a couple of occasions to get Kath to watch it, my partner, and she won't be forced. Kath is a very keen runner, and I remember once Caster Semenya was running a race on the telly and was just about bursting into that last 400 yards where her stride becomes a real thing to see.
Oh, yeah.
And I said to Kath, wow, look, here goes Caster Semenya. And she was on the sofa with me, but she wouldn't turn her head the 4 inches of arc it would require to watch, because she didn't like being told what to do. And anyway, I got her as far as the pilot of Twin Peaks about a year ago, and she didn't care for it, so we didn't even finish watching the 90-minute pilot. And I love it so much. You know, it's a difficult, emotional thing to share something you love with someone you love if they don't like it.
Yeah.
I remember how she hated Man with Two Brains, the Steve Martin film. Anyway, so this time we had she suggested it, in fact, to my joy, and I played it down like, oh, you know, can if you like. And we watched the whole pilot, and she said after that was absolutely brilliant. And I said, well, I can't understand. We watched it before, you didn't like it. She said, yeah, I think, if I remember rightly, the last time I watched it, I was angry with you, so I decided not to like it.
Oh.
Respect. Absolute respect.
Is that how we live, people?
Was that your reply?
No, I'd be too frightened to say that. I just said, yes, darling. Well, it's all turned out for the best, I think, is what I say.
This is Frank Skinner. This is
Absolute Radio.
Hello, this is Frank Skinner on Absolute Radio with Emily Dean and Alan Cochrane. Don't text us. We're not really here. I'm afraid this is a pre-recorded show. But you can still follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Frank on the Radio. And of course, you can email us via the Absolute Radio website. We've put a couple of things on Twitter and Instagram, though, that are mainly about people, I think, who went in at the deep end at various activities. One example being the first time Alan Cochrane went on an aeroplane, he flew to Australia.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope he stopped on the way.
Yeah. But
Kuala Lumpur?
I think it was somewhere like Abu Dhabi or...
Oh, okay.
But it was one of those ones where I stayed in the airport for 7 hours and then flew onwards to Australia. So it was still quite a big commitment.
Jakarta.
I remember,
That's what it was.
No, she went on an aeroplane.
I knew you'd do it. I knew you had it in you.
We stopped at Kuala Lumpur, and I was smoking at the time, and you could smoke on the flight in those days if you sat near the back. So I wasn't sitting at the back, obviously. So I went into the first class lounge at Kuala Lumpur, and there was a guy there, and I said, are you allowed, just before I went in, I said, are you allowed to smoke in the first class lounge here? And the guy said, I think you have to. And when I went in, I think everybody in there was smoking at different times. Yeah. Smoking's bad for you, by the way. Can I tell you that's the official Absolute Radio policy?
Uh-huh.
We've had some of our readers have got in touch via Twitter regarding In at the Deep End moments. Alex Ware says, my first time playing a gig abroad was a hardcore heavy rock festival in Belgium. We were an acoustic act.
Oh, dear.
Oh, come on.
Oh dear. My first time I played banjo on stage was at a bluegrass festival in Kansas.
Really?
Where, it is, banjo playing is a very, very serious activity. And I was really bad. I mean, I'm not being modest. I could barely get through the tune. It was for a documentary. And it was all set up for my humiliation, as some documentaries are. And I'm not proud of this, but as I went on stage, I adopted a slight limp. What I was trying to get across was the audience to think, I bet this guy used to be a brilliant banjo player and then he's been in some terrible accident.
Right.
And he's still battling on, but, now
it's nice that you gave them quite a big internal monologue about you.
Well, it was a very tense... I got to say, it was the judges on this banjo contest sat behind a curtain so you couldn't see them.
Oh, yeah.
And I was told that's because there'd been physical threats in the past, like weeks after the event.
Yeah.
Some judge had been getting into his pickup, just waiting while the red setter jumped in the back. And a bloke would appear from a tree and said, "What in the hell's wrong with you?" And grab him by the straps of his dungarees and throw him across the car park. So that was a terrifying experience, I must say. I picked my way through a wildwood flower like ink, 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 ink. Ugh. But still warm applause at the end, just in case the limp was real, I felt, from the audience.
Frank Skinner on Absolute Radio.
Have we had any other sort of online contact?
Yes, we have. We've had a missive from Steffi, if Twitter can count as a missive. A brief missive. She says, in at the deep end, I moved to Bristol from Reading on a total whim without ever having visited the place. I got a cab from the station, asked him where a nice place to live would be. He dropped me there and I found a house to rent. I've been here 18 years now. 18 years.
That's amazing.
And have the mafia found you?
Steffi,
wow,
close quotes.
Incredible. I thought it was going to be Steffi here. I married Boris Becker straight off. That's brilliant, though. And it worked out, I assume.
Yeah,
right.
Do you know what Steffi ends the tweet with? Best decision I ever made. How often can you say that?
Wow.
Yeah, what's the best decision you guys ever made?
4 eggs on toast.
The hospital pass.
Well,
I take it back.
I mean, I have a few. Imagine how sycophantic if I said doing this show, Frank. But it's true.
Yeah, would it be? I would say be up there with some of mine doing this show.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
Can we just have
laugh?
One more from Annie Gay, who says, first and last time I went windsurfing in La Manga, Spain. Very windy day. I couldn't control the board and was lost at sea for several hours before being rescued by a German windsurfer.
Wow, that's a terrifying story.
Annie, are you okay?
Someone who's a bit frightened of water, I mean, that is a scary story.
Well, I suppose when we ask, what have you been in at the deep end, we're going to get a water-based story eventually.
It couldn't have been more perfect than that, really.
Yeah. Annie's delivered.
The sea.
Well done, Annie.
You're deep end.
You're a hero. Has there been any response to last week? Because I like it when we get stuff that people
we have actually
heard and then pull us up on or something.
You were asking some questions last week about Justin Toper.
Yes, well, because we were talking about the NASA and astrology, which was in the news last week, and I looked up when I hear the word astrology, I think Justin Toper. Yeah. So I I looked up his Twitter, and all I found really of note was that he said he'd developed a new catchphrase for saying goodbye, which was "Stay frosty."
Well,
I didn't understand what it meant.
some of our outside world correspondents seem to think that he did not develop this catchphrase of "Stay frosty." It seems to be already a thing. James Foley.
In there.
Topa's behind the curve.
Stay frosty is a catchphrase off Call of Duty. Jacko says also in Generation Cool, means stay cool and focused, I think. So it's sort of like a version of Stay Cool, but on steroids and, in warfare, albeit online warfare.
A sort of military phrase, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
what do you think of that?
I'm sorry. I mean, don't shoot the messenger. I trusted Topa that it was his thing. And that's what happened when you don't trust Topa. That's my...
This is the problem with plagiarists. Like, they get away with it for a while, don't they?
It makes you wonder if his predictions are all straight off the bat, or if...
probably reworded Mystic Begs, aren't they?
Oh, I hope not. That'd be awful. Maybe there's just like a sort of a bank of things that they go to.
Are you sure it's not a reference to his highlights? Because he does have very frosty tips on his hair, I'm just saying.
Oh, it's really good that he's... I expected you to say, we've had a text saying that Justin Topa died in the early 2000s. I'm just happy that he's... Even if he's thieving, I'm still happy he's alive.
Frank Skinner on
Absolute Radio.
We were in what we like to call the outside world, looking at our weekly correspondence. What else is kicking around?
I'll tell you who we've heard from, our international readers, and I love hearing from them. The best use of the word international, by the way, I ever saw was on a fax, which was back in the day when I was training at the Sunday Times, and I saw the fashion director received a fax from, I believe it was Giorgio Armani, saying, "Thank you so much. You really are one of my closest, international friends."
Wow, that's lovely.
Giorgio.
Dana International, of course, is a great use of it.
So this is from
a documentary the other night that referred to someone as one of Colour TV's best loved personalities.
Oh, that's good.
And Colour TV is not something I really think of anymore. Obviously, it is Colour TV, but it doesn't seem like you have to make that point anymore. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I'll tell you what I watched as well. I watched a documentary about Bob Ross.
Me too.
Did you watch that? Terrible documentary. Do you think?
Not a great documentary,
Awful. But good to see. Good to see that Bob Ross is someone we talk about occasionally on. He does a show called The Love of Painting.
Joy of Painting.
Yes,
Joy of Painting.
yes.
And he has a very, very set technique. To me, it looks every picture just seems he just does the same picture every week for 300 shows. But it gets worse. Turns out that he saw a bloke doing a TV show on public TV, as they call it over there. And he was using this method. So Bob Ross used that method. I mean, he worked for the guy and was became his second in command. So it's not even Bob Ross's method.
I'm surprised that this is what you thought of as the big reveal of Bob Ross's. I felt like the fact that his hair was permed was the...
That was a shocker.
Was that revealed?
Yeah.
They said that he was a straight-haired man who permed his hair so he didn't have to cut it so often because funds were very low. Now, that does not sound like a believable excuse to me.
Yeah.
I remember Kevin Keegan at least had the gall to just say, no, I think it looks great. So, I thought Bob was disingenuous in the extreme. Although he wasn't.
What was Martin Shaw's excuse? Actually, his was au naturel, I think, wasn't it, Martin Shaw?
Was it? And Gambit as well. I think his was natural.
Okay.
You know Gambit from the New Avengers?
Yes, I
Gareth
know.
Hunt. Okay, anyway.
Shall we go back to our international friends?
Yes.
You asked them the question, does Flying Ant Day happen on the continent? Joe Keating says, flying ants witnessed here in Japan today. I thought you'd like to know. Sophie Williams, Frank was asking if there's Flying Ant Day on the continent. We certainly have it here in Greece.
In Japan as well?
Yeah.
And France.
That is... the reason I asked about France is because Marion Cotillard, when I explained it to her, denied all knowledge of Flying Ant Day. But even I didn't think they did it in Japan. That's fantastic.
Well, Al, we have got someone living in France who said, this is Laurie Whitten, and she says, living in France, yes, we have Flying Ant Days. They generally foresee a big storm.
Can I say I'm a bit disappointed she didn't say we?
Yeah.
But, you know.
Frank Skinner.
Frank Skinner.
Absolute Radio.
So, I usually around this time ask you guys what's in the news. I know it's a risk nowadays because there's so much awfulness, but there's usually a bit of jollity out there.
Well, there is. There's still some. There's a story this week that 2 children in the Shanghai Museum of Glass.
Oh, yes.
They knocked over a Disney castle that was a blown glass sculpture worth over £50,000.
Oh.
The sculpture has taken the artist 500 hours to complete. 500,000 glass loops in it, spires made of 24 karat gold.
Sounds terrible.
It does sound horrible.
Sounds like probably a thing that was better smashed.
It sounds like an accident waiting to happen, but apparently they were playing tig or chase or something and ran through a barrier and knocked it over. I mean, I think it should have been in the news just as partly a PR on behalf of children who are often accused of not running and not moving around anymore, you know, with the childhood obesity.
Yeah,
And
well, I think a PR for Tag as well, which I thought was on the way out. Still popular, it turns out, in the Far East.
Probably not bad for China to be in the press in a positive way as well.
Yeah, I should think Tag in China has gone off the boil a bit in recent years. I suppose it gives you a bit more purpose in your running away.
I mean, can you imagine them telling that story, trying to get sympathy, the parents, and they begin it saying, well, I mean, the kids, they were just playing chase in the Shanghai Museum of Glass.
Yes.
I mean, come on. What were you honestly expecting?
Yeah, it's quite close to a modern version of Bull in China Shop, isn't it? Playing children in modern Museum of Glass.
Yes.
Well, it's a good job. I mean, if they'd been throwing stones, there would have been no possible proverbial comeback because they'd been warned by that. I tell you what, the parents did say, which I thought was rash indeed. What I would not say if my child ran into a £50,000 glass castle is we'll pay for any damages, is what they said, which is insanity. I would have said my child could have been killed by that badly secured glass castle. Oh man, can you imagine? I mean, what's he got? So they said if it's got to be mended, we'll pay for it. That's the stupidest thing anyone's ever said.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope they've got a side hustle because that's going to take a while to pay off that one.
Well, they must be
in
filthy
fact,
rich people.
If they haven't got that many money, are they just going to end up like washing the dishes in the kitchen, like old school?
That's
Well, I
good,
think
whatever happened to.
Watching the exhibits with Winderley.
Frank,
You know what? I ate glass as well. Really ate
extraordinary thing to say.
Glass. I don't mind windows. But you know, we did a thing about working class ornaments a few weeks back. I always think about those glass fish that had got like a bit of squiggly paint in them in the glass. Did you remember those?
I
They
do.
would stand on their fins. ugly. And there used to be like glass clowns that people used to have. Really the most horrible stuff. And I'll tell you something. I went to Elton John's villa in Nice and he'd got loads of it. Like, unironically. I didn't say. Simple as that.
Not till now on the radio.
No.
Well, you know what? That's why you're tilt-handing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is more than I can say for the Disney Castle in the Shanghai Museum. Have you ever been to the Disney Castle at Disneyland Paris?
We should say there are two castles for avoidance of doubt. This was based on the Cinderella Castle, which is the one in Disney World. The OG is the Sleeping Beauty Castle in California.
Well, the one in Paris, I went into this fantastic Disney castle like you get on all the films and stuff. And it's mainly offices. There's a shop, of course. In the bottom, there's a dragon cave. But generally speaking, it's an enormous disappointment. As much as I loved Disneyland Paris, I'm saying that as if I'm going to get any freebies from there. But I tell you something, the first time I went to Disneyland Paris, they gave me a guide for the day who took us to the front of every queue. And we could just go on the rides over and over again. It was brilliant. Free tickets. I mean, it was just joyous. The next time, no guide, but still free tickets. The next time, a bit less. Last time, I think I got a free balloon for the Tarzan cartoon. It's been a downward slope for me and Disneyland Paris. I'll be straight with you.
Frank Skinner.
Absolute Radio.
We were talking about the Disney Castle and its collapse at the Shanghai Museum. Is it true? This could be an urban myth, but there was a story oft told that a woman and a child, I think the child had been ill or something at Disneyland in Florida, whatever that Disney place is called. And so they took them into a little staff thing so the child could sit down and have a drink of water and whatnot. And the child saw the Mickey Mouse character taking its head off. And the child was so traumatised by this. Because I should say, if there's any children listening, there's the real Mickey Mouse and then there's one or two impressionists. And the child saw the head coming off and was traumatised. And the mother ended up taking Disney to, I think, got an out-of-court settlement for many, many thousands of dollars. Have you heard that, or is it an urban?
I have heard something similar because they're so strict, aren't they? But I believe there's a line painted at which point the actors are allowed to take the heads off, and not before that line.
But there used to be another. Do you remember the stuff that no of the male staff could have moustaches, beards, or sideburns because it was felt that it wasn't sort of child friendly enough.
Is that right?
Well, wait till they hear about Santa.
Yeah. Well, I think they also. I imagine there were some concerns in France with the possibility of characters being seen, goofy with a gitane.
Yes.
Because
not easy to smoke if you're goofy, I wouldn't have thought. It all seems such a long way away from your head. All the action is happening. It would be an ironic death, wouldn't it, for children to be killed by a falling Disney castle. It seems like the wrongest death you could have. There is one of my favourite. I love a piece of, really hardcore irony when you think, I can't believe that. For many years, people were always saying that Walt Disney was cryogenically preserved.
Yeah.
You know, he was in a
yes.
fridge somewhere. You must have heard this.
Well,
He
I'd
was
say he's in the cryogenics chair, to be honest.
I'd agree with that. I think when people talk about cryogenics, they talk about Walt Disney. Sometimes people say it's just his head that's been.
That's
If anyone isn't aware of this, who's listening, the idea is that people are frozen, and when a cure is found for whatever they had, or some sort of eternal life elixir, they can bring them back, take them out the fridge and bring them back to life. It's a complete myth. He's not. He was. And the irony is he was cremated.
Oh, really?
Walt Disney. And the irony for me is ashes, of course, is what you put on ice to stop it from being slippy. So to me, it's the most ironic confusion that you could have. What's your favourite piece of hardcore irony?
Yeah,
it's got to be Clint Eastwood allergic to horses has got to be up there.
He isn't.
He is.
We'll just keep coming out with these big ironies.
Look, we'll come back to this.
Frank Skinner on
Absolute Radio.
This is Frank Skinner on Absolute Radio with Emily Dean and Alan Cochrane. Don't text us. We are not live, unfortunately, but soon we will be. But don't text us today. You can, however, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Frank on the Radio, or you can email us via the Absolute Radio website. We were talking. I was slightly rudely interrupted, not by you guys, but by a sudden gust of wind in the north room where I'm working. Has led to my life-size cardboard Dalek crumbling and sort of slightly crashing into my bedside lamp. I've actually taken a photo of it, and I'll put that up so you can see what a horror it is to see a Dalek fall like that.
Good work keeping it relatable with your house that's so big. You have to have north, south, east, and west.
Well, I work in the top room, but there's a. As you know, I recently did a poetry podcast, and there is a poem by William Carlos Williams where he talks about being in the north room, and ever since then I've referred to this as the north. I don't even know if he means the top bit, but he might just be like literally the room that's at the north. But anyway, that's what I call it now.
The room where it happens. Also, Al, I believe the sentence, what a horror it is to see a Dalek fall, also works without the word fall.
Well, it is. That's because they're the most terrifying villains in the cosmos.
So spooky.
Let us not forget. Can I say on the subject of poetry that Emily Dean earlier told me I've written a book about how to enjoy poetry, and Emily Dean told me when it was coming out.
Yes.
Well, I was cruising online, as I tend to, and I suddenly saw a press announcement saying Frank Skinner to release poetry book. Who knew?
It's not. Can I say it's not? It's about poetry. I haven't written any poetry. Can I reassure you?
Okay, we've all had a drink.
I heard about it on my poetry app.
Yeah, have you got Poetry News updates? Do you remember when I downloaded that and never got any, so I got the 69p back from iTunes.
One of your greatest and simultaneously lowest points.
It was. That's ages ago as well.
Please, I'm very excited.
Alert.
Oh, do you know what, Frank? Now you've got the poetry book out, you're going to get invites from people like Will Gompertz. Mm-hmm. You know, the posh people. Yeah. You'll be in the arts crowd now.
Do you know Will Gompertz? No, we should put a bit of cream on it. It doesn't quite work that, but it was near enough.
Works enough.
Well, you get an A for effort. I was talking about hardcore irony. This is not off the back of me writing a poetry book, but I think the most hardcore. Do you know what I mean by hardcore irony? When something you think, oh, I can't believe that. Like Clint Eastwood is one, along with John Wayne, I would say one of the great Western stars of all time. Is allergic to horses.
Yeah, I think that's
pretty
in
ironic.
The category of irony, yeah.
And the other one, which I think is obviously, with all due respect to his family and all that, the man who bought the Segway company you know this, he went on a Segway and went over a cliff. And that was how he lost his life. So that is, I mean, it's tragic, but you cannot deny there is an irony to that. I must have told you, but I'm going to tell you again. I was once driving over Lambeth Bridge in London, and I saw a man coming in the other direction, a man with like a suit and tie on a Segway. And I thought, how big do you have to be doing that? And when he got closer, it was Lembit Opik. And that's how big you have to be.
Answered the question.
Of course, he'll be... I was going to say I'll be laughing on the other side of his face, but that's not quite right. But he will be celebrating this week because he has predicted that an asteroid is going to hit the Earth. For years he's been saying that. And now it might well be, as I was explaining earlier, that one smashed into Birmingham yesterday. If I remember the details right. Let's hope that didn't happen because I've got property there.
Yeah, of course you do.
It'd be awful.
Frank Skinner.
Absolute Radio.
We were talking about the Disney castle, and it's the glass version of it that got smashed this week. Do you remember when I told you? I remember Emily had a particularly strong response to this. That when I grew up in the Black Country, we used to be lots of men who drove motorbikes and mopeds and stuff, and they didn't bother taking off their crash helmets. So they would just go into shops and stuff, like still in their crash helmets, and order and get a newspaper and have a chat and then leave. It's an absolute commonplace.
Yeah.
And I recently, on the Disney subject, I got Disney Plus.
Yeah.
I paid for it. I paid for it.
Did you?
Yeah.
I'm really shocked to hear that.
And I got it in order to watch The Mandalorian, which is the new sort of Star Wars-based series. And in it, it's about a man who never removes his helmet, The Mandalorian. It really took me back to those days of my youth when those blokes wandered about in their crash helmet. Just couldn't be bothered to carry. He's going to carry a crash helmet. Easiest place to carry it. On your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I like the idea of a man breaking up with you whilst not even bothering to remove the crash helmet. Or saying, it's not good news. He's not going to make it, I'm afraid.
There has been times I've dumped people when I'd wished I'd had a crash helmet. I'll tell you something I ought to do. My next book is Things I Used to See a Lot, but I don't since I moved to London. And one thing, when I lived in the Black Country, which something I never see now, is I used to see lots of blokes walking around with a cue case.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, do you see that in Manchester, Al?
I don't see it in Manchester, but I really associate it with Scotland. Whenever I go to Scotland, I see somebody carrying a cue case. It was
the only luggage I ever really saw men with. Was a nice, neat cue case where people thought they used to moan about the cues in snooker halls. You know, they weren't good enough, and etc. etc.
I think Steve Davis lost a cue and was then so attached to the replacement that he would go to hotels with it at breakfast and stuff. That a friend who was into snooker told me that he was very attached to his cue.
Well, what I would like to do is to get a cue case, and then all my work, any writing I do, I'd start working more on scrolls than notes.
Oh, yeah.
And then I could carry that and the pens and stuff in a lovely cue case.
That'd be good.
And maybe I could have my own chopsticks.
Write a new show on till ribbon. You know that?
Oh, yeah. That would be great, wouldn't it? It could be called till ribbon, you know, on tour or something like that. Oh, till ribbon. Be a great surname for a character in an Oscar Wilde short story. Josiah Tilribbon. Anyway,
Frank, you're
Yes,
talking
we were
about writing. I would like to give our readers details of the book because you were a bit...
I wish I had them. You know more than I do.
have them. That's you were a bit mysterious about it, and that's no way to be, can I tell you? The book is out on the 10th of September. Good choice. And it is called, Frank, do you know the name of the book?
I believe it's called How to Enjoy Poetry. Is that right?
Correct. As part of the Little Ways to Live a Big Life series. You can pre-order it now.
Thank you so much for that. And can we say Emily Dean's book is still available in all good bookshops? Al, anything you want to plug?
I've not even written a memo.
Not even on Till Ribbon?
Frank Skinner on
Absolute Radio.
On that subject of children breaking an expensive museum exhibit, which obviously would normally be a terrible thing, but for some reason when it's a glass version of the Disney castle doesn't seem to matter. I don't know if this is not a lovely story, but as a child, I was 4. I think I was 4. And the little girl next door was standing on what we used to call the palings, which was like we didn't live near the Michael Palin's family. It's like a fences that the council used to put up when I was a kid. And they were like sticks joined together by wire, if you know what palings are. And this little girl was standing. She was probably my age as well. And she was I don't mean my age now. I mean my age then. She was standing on the fence. And I said, get off our fence. And she wouldn't. And I told her several times and I was losing my temper. And in the end, I picked up a very big brick and threw it at her. And it split her head open. She fell on the floor covered in blood and cried. And I cried. And it was an incident, and it was a terrible thing.
Yeah, not nice.
It is not nice. And I've often thought that could have been, if that had gone the wrong way, that could have had a negative view on my career. You don't get many junior murderers.
I like the fact that you've instantly gone career rather than morality.
It's something that I look back on. Obviously, I wouldn't want to have killed the child either. But do you know what I mean? The junior murderer. I can't think of any junior murderers who've done well in light entertainment.
Yeah, maybe. Yes.
No, you're right.
There's something about murdering. There's no appreciation of the prodigy aspect in murdering.
There's something like it.
There's no sort of Mozart of murder, is there?
No.
Virtuoso.
No, exactly.
There's none. There's some, I've got to be honest, that I believe would be capable of murder. I think we all know who they are.
Children.
In like entertainment?
No, in entertainment industry.
Oh, you mean as children? Yeah, but the thing is, as a kid, I would still now have felt responsible for that, even though it was something I did when I was 4 in a temper. It would still have been me. There's no getting around it. I mean, thank God it turned out to be just a flesh wound in the end. She never really forgave me. I think that's true to say, but
fair enough.
But, so the Disney castle pales into comparison for me than the neighbour's kid. I also had can I just say, when I got older, this is a slightly different story. Do you remember the baby Burko? I don't mean the young former Speaker of the House. A baby Burko was like a mini washing machine that people just did nappies in the days when people used to wash nappies.
Oh, was it like, I remember the baby belling, the little stove we'd had, the mini stove at school. It was similar thing.
Maybe there was all the white goods maybe came in baby versions in those
And then
days.
just a beer fridge.
Yeah.
The small, men behaving badly fridges that people had in their living room.
Ow, that's my deal breaker. If I walk into a man's house, there's a beer fridge. Out.
Do you know the ones in dressing rooms with a glass door, that see-through door?
Yes.
Is it like one of those?
Yeah.
So, anyway, there was one of those, and on top of it was a piece of art that someone had done at school, and it was a phoenix made from scrap metal. And I leaned on the thing, and the phoenix, my elbow hit the baby Burko, the phoenix fell off, and the point of its wing went into my forehead.
Ouch.
And I bled quite a lot. And for months after, I looked like I was the victim of a reckless ventouse procedure. So, again, for me, worse than the Disney castle getting broken.
Frank Skinner.
Frank Skinner.
Absolute Radio.
We were talking earlier about the irony of the fact that Clint Eastwood, the great cowboy, is allergic to horses in reality. And I've just remembered another... that'd be a good text in, wouldn't it? Favourite Clint Eastwood facts. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. I remember he got sacked once from a movie. I remember reading this because the director said his Adam's apple was too big. That is a... and I think Burt Reynolds was sacked by the same director and said to Clint Eastwood, he sacked me because he said I couldn't act. He said, but I can learn to act. You can do nothing about your Adam's apple.
At least he's got hair, Bert.
Yeah, this director had some very tight terms and conditions of employment, didn't he?
Do you know how old Clint Eastwood is?
90.
He was 90 in I think, May.
Oh, was he?
Wow.
Well, that was a good guess.
Yeah. You're
Frank, we've been talking about breakages, and I've just remembered, didn't you have a nativity scene breakage, or am I imagining that?
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
It wasn't actually. What happened was that I was head shepherd in the school nativity play, and we were supposed to... I had to lead the shepherd so that we could kneel around the baby Jesus. That's what we were told to do. So I went in, and someone had forgot to put the plastic doll who represented the baby Jesus in the actual manger, and he was in a crisp box at the back of the stage. So I went and knelt at the crisp box following the word. And the headmistress, who I shouldn't name, was so furious, she picked me up by my ankle and sort of swung me round.
Yes.
And... there are other details to this story which I can't really go into, but
that's one of my favourite. I love that story, but I was actually referring to a moment with Buzz where I believe he'd gone into church,
sorry,
and I think
yes.
Buzz might have broken something.
Yes, Buzz broke a head off one of the. He was small, and he pushed one of the shepherds, and it fell over, and its head snapped off. So we went and knocked on the door of the vicarage. And no answer. Oh. And so I went to the
Where is
local
he when you need him?
Exactly. You know,
it's a busy time for them at Christmas.
Yeah. And it's good for you to stick up for the church. I say the church, our church. And I went to the local paper shop, got super glue, went back into the church and stuck his head back on. And in fact, every year... This was in Cheltenham. Every year we go back and have a look at that shepherd. And although I did a pretty good job, there's still a bit of a Bride of Frankenstein scar on the neck where the head was put on.
That's where the light gets in.
Yeah.
So, do you think the parents should have done similarly? I do.
Well, I imagine if the Disneyland castle goes over, though, it's a big, loud, and also you don't get it. It wouldn't be that there was no one in the Shanghai Glass Museum, and they went and knocked on the door of the Glasserage. There was no answer.
You can't imagine it happening and the dad going, nothing to see here, and just putting his hands to each side of himself.
No, and the dad, he's sort of going to the gift shop for super glue. It's a different context altogether.
Frank Skinner. Frank Skinner.
Absolute Radio.
Absolute Radio.
So, as we near the end of the show, have we got AOB?
We have. Armitage has got in touch regarding in at the deep end moments in life. He has straight to solids as a child.
Anybody else want more details?
Can the child go straight to solids?
Do you know what, Al? I like the lack of detail. That's what I love about it, the purity of that.
I wanted to talk about a pool game because I knew blokes that used to call the spots, they used to call them solids.
Oh, yeah.
Could he have meant that? No.
I like the idea that he went from being a baby drinking milk to sitting at a table with cutlery, but with no rampant
he wouldn't have drunk milk, would he? He'd have gone straight to solids. That's the point.
Amazing.
James has also got in touch and said first journey after passing his driving test for the 7th time was from Aberdeenshire to West Yorkshire.
Wow. Very
first drive.
My very first unaccompanied drive, I went on Spaghetti Junction.
Oh, that's big.
Which is...
in at the deep end. Yeah.
But she had promised.
God.
So
you've also asked. You also asked about people's favourite sort of ironies, with the example of Clint Eastwood being allergic to horses.
Exactly.
And we've had a couple of responses to that. Rob Doolan, only one of the Beach Boys knew how to surf.
Oh yeah, Dennis Wilson, I think. He's the only one who surfed.
Also, love a pop star named Dennis. Doesn't happen often these days. Dominic Jones is very Route 1, but the drummer from ZZ Top is named Frank Beard. Despite, boys, can you finish that?
Being the only one in ZZ Top without a beard.
Correct.
It's a fabulous fact, though.
Yeah.
Do you think there was any deliberateness in that? Did he think that he'd brought enough beard to the table, as it were, with his name?
His beard work was done.
Yeah, I hope that was. So. I hope that was the case.
And finally, we've got Neil Shepperton, who says the Melton Mowbray pork pie ambassador is vegetarian. He's revealed.
No.
Clint Eastwood, this is another in my list of Clint Eastwood facts, is vegan.
He's not.
That doesn't seem right, does it?
Well, can I tell you what else doesn't seem right? Lady Gaga, of meat dress fame, bringing out a vegan beauty range.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think maybe that meat dress, she just had an enormous bruise. And she was operating on the black eye theory. I don't know if people ever really put steak on a black eye. Have you ever put steak on a black eye? That is, email us about that. I think it might be up there with Mickey Mouse's head, so to speak. Which, yes, so look, we moved to the end of the show now, and we believe, God willing, that next week we will be back in the studio and live, which will be fantastic. I'm very excited about that. There may be masks, but, so what? Sarah Champion is up next. Do listen to her. And we were just pontificating as to whether when she got together with her family at Christmas, they sang We Are the Champions. If they don't, then they have let me down enormously. Anyway, thanks for listening. If the good Lord spares us and the creeks don't rise, we'll be back again this time next week. Stay frosty.
This is Frank Skinner. This is
Absolute Radio.